yun? Ano ginagawa mo?
Mga sayaw.
Mukhang money kailang. Yan ang palagi opening natin.
Kasi maganda yung music na yan ni Chester
Napaindak.
Napaindak si Yan.
Ganyan, dapat may pole nakatabi.
Ay!
Iba naman yan.
Iba yun. Iba yun.
Talaga, iba. Macho dancer yan. Yan yung ano. Oo.
Bombero yun, Bok
Yung bumababa.
Mababa, tas may langis yung pool, no?
Yan,
Ayan, mga tito.
Ito yung may langis yung katawan ni Manny dapat.
Yan.
Naglalangis.
Ay, mga Yotits.
Baka may magbo-volunteer. Langisan ng katawan ni Manny Mag.
Ayan. Pero marami tayong viewers. Oo, yung mga Yotits, welcome po sa kauna-unang gabi ng buwan ng Oktubre, mga kapatid. Oo.
Yan.
Oktubre na, no? Diyos ko, ang bilis. My God.
Himala. Maaga natin kasama si ano ngayon.
Si Ed Lingao, palakpakan po natin si Tito Ed.
Si Justice Lingao.
Oo. Tito Ed.
Wala ka ba?
Oo nga
Wala sa kabila?
Umabsent ako.
Wala ka ba sa kabila?
Sino ba dapat yung bisita ninyo, Bok?
Mike Defensor, tungkol dun sa ano? Sa speaker pa rin.
Speaker pa rin.
Ay, huwag ka magalala.
Wala ka naman yan.
Umiiwas ka ba, Bok? Hindi naman.
Hindi. Dami na. Ilang beses na ang ginigay si Mike Defensor
May kongresista tayong makakasama rin mamaya para... Oo. Kaya ito yung suot kong... Oo. Kaya ito yung suot kong shirt.
Bulaklakin.
Dapat pala na ganoon, no?
Naman.
Dapat pala nag-usap tayo pagpupugay. Nasuot ko yung ganyan ko. Minsan na lang pala. Si Ed may ganyan din. May collection ng batik yan. Si Manny. Meron din yung si Manny. Di ba, Manny? Sayang.
Kaya cool itong representative na to kasi
Chill.
Hawaiian shirt siya lagi. Okay. Siguro, ready na po ngayon mga kapatid mula po sa Buhay Party List. Kasama po natin si Representative Lito Atienza. Sir, magandang gabi po, sir.
Magandang gabi po sa inyong apat.
Yun.
Yan.
Matutuloy po kami.
Mabuhay.
Sir, magandang gabi po.
Yan ang pagbati ng mga Pilipino. Mabuhay.
Mabuhay kayo. Kong at ex-mayor. Kong, simulan natin. Yun nangyari doon sa Kongreso. Yung resignation na sinundan ng motion para i-reject yung resignation. Ano yun? Drama o talagang sinusuway ang presidente?
Magkahalo. Telenovela at pagsuway. Sa payo ng ating Pangulo. Dahil malinaw ang payo ng Pangulo. Honor sa term sharing. Palabra de honor is more important than anything else. Ang ganda ng mga binigkas ng ating Pangulo. Pangaral sa kanila. Kaya ako'y umaasa, tapos na ang kwento. Nagsalita ng Pangulo. Pero yung ginawa kahapon, telenovela yun, drama yun. Alam naman ni Congressman Mike Defensor, alam niya yan, I'm sure he knows, because he played a very key role in the telenovela. Offer to resign, ay hindi tama yun. Ang usapan October 14 You cannot just pick up everything and say, I'm quitting. But hindi. If you are concerned about the nation, you shouldn't do that. We're talking about the budget. We're talking about vital pieces of legislation. So therefore, honor your word again. Just wait for October 14, finish the budget, and then we break it. We will have a break on the 17th. Within that week, we will take a long vacation. Tapos na budget before we take the vacation. Kaya itong offer to resign and then Mike Defensor stands up and says, let's put it in a vote. Bakit binoboto pa? Kung he will step down, he'll step down. There's no need. No need for any vote, but we had to go through a vote. And I voted...
So, Kong, okay. Kong, so ano yun?
Yes.
Nagpapahabol lang to si Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano, kumbaga, no? Or, kasi ang lumalabas din, itong si Congressman Lord Alan Velasco, gusto ngayon na yung palitan.
Hindi, kay Congressman Velasco, doon sa anumang pensang kasunduan natin. Sumunod tayo. They both agreed. October 14. Inamin naman ni Congressman Cayetano yan kahapon in his valedictory kuno speech. Sinabi niya na we agreed on October 14. Pumayag ako. Pero ang hirap, nag-violate na naman siya. Meron na namang ibang accusation. Naiisip ko tuloy, pagka payag, may paraan. Pag ayaw,
Maraming dahilan.
Baka mamaya, pagdating ng October 14, sabihin ba niya, ayoko yung hati ng buhok mo eh. Bakit nasa tol? Bakit nasa kaliwa? Lagay mo sa kanan.
Malapit sila doon dahil pinagawain nila yung birthday, di ba? Kung sino dapat mag-birthday na speaker.
Para kami mga bata. Tinatrato ang Kongreso without any respect for the membership. So I voted for it, yes, to the motion of Congressman Defensor because I felt you cannot resign tonight. You resign. You step down on October 14 because that was the date agreed upon in front of the President. Yung manager nyo, nag-usap kayo, talagay mo, 2 weeks pa siya maglilingkod. He will have a smooth turnover to the next manager. Tapos bigla kang sasabihin Then I'm quitting now. Tonight, I'm getting out of my office. Siyempre magagalit yung board of directors. You cannot do that. You turn over properly if you're really thinking of the good of the company. Ito naman, sinasabi nila, para sa bayan. Eh di dapat orderly and turnover, bigay mo lahat yung requirement, tapos sabi mo, sige, ikaw na gumanap ng trabaho ngayon. At kung kailangan mo, tulong ko. Yun ang maginoo. Yun ang statesman. Yun ang patriot. Pero pag ang sinabi, ganyan, a litany of performances. I'm the best. Nobody can equal me. Me and myself.
This is my last speech. May ganun pa siya kahapon.
What about the term sharing agreement, which is the main issue here? The main issue is, will you honor your word or not?
Pero kung
You state that very, very clearly.
Apo. Pero kung nag-meeting kahapon yung Pangulo with Alan Peter and supposedly lumabas doon sa meeting na yun, hands off raw yung Pangulo doon sa battle for the speakership sa Kongreso. If that is to be believed, di parang sasabi ng Malacanang, bahala na kayo sa Kongreso, so whoever has the numbers gets to bag the speakership.
Hindi naman ganun. Ang ibig sabihin lang ng Presidente, nag-usap na tayo, mag-uusap na naman tayo ngayon. Yun ang underlying reason for that statement. I cannot keep on meddling. You came here, and I already admonished you, honor your word. Palabra de honor, importante rito. They tried presenting the manifesto signed by Congressman Defensor and company. Hindi nga binasa ng Pangulo. Sabi, I don't need that. We're talking about palabra de honor. That's the main issue now. Kaya sabi, bigyan mo na lang yan kay Senator Bago. Sabi rin ito, Senator Bago, why me? Give it to the 8. Kaya, pakikita nyo ang sentimiento ng Pangulo. He wants to put an end to all of this and for Congress to buckle down to work. And hirap meron na namang komplikasyon. Kaya, I cannot blame the President if he is peeved. And maybe, he's trying to now test. Ano ba talagang loyalty nito mga ito? Tumatakbo sa akin para sa payo. Kung hindi kayo susunod, di ba kayo sumunod? Yun ang ibig sabihin ng Pangulo. May halong inisyon. Pero paregay ko, ang damdamin ng Pangulo, igalang ninyo yung salita nyo. Gusto nyo maging kapanipaniwalang mga leader. Learn how to honor your word. The term sharing agreement was forged, agreed upon, and nagsilbi naman si Cayetano na hindi gumagambala in any way. Si Velasco. Pero pati yun, ginagawa nilang issue.
Tahimik ka naman
Hindi ka naman tumutulong.
Hindi ka nagsasalita.
Parang ganun. Salita, masama. Kung hindi alam, masama.
Kung ang pinapalabas si Speaker, parang hindi mapapasa tong budget na to kung wala ako. So kailangan nyo ako. Ganun ba talaga yun, Kong?
Hindi naman.
Naniniwala ako sa kakayahan ng mga miyembro ng Kongreso. For that matter, anybody can be speaker. Ang Kongreso tatakbo yan.
Bali ata intindi ni Harry Roque.
Oo nga Parang pro forma yung sagot eh.
Oo, parang...
Ano ba in-expect nyo sabihin?
Beauty Queen answer. Beauty Queen answer yung statement nito. Nire-respeto ng presidente, desisyon ng Kamara, blah, blah, blah. So, parang it's a beauty pageant answer.
I do not expect Secretary Roque to go against what is now happening and unfolding. Kung sisira kayo ng salita niyo, bahala kayo. Pero ako, nagsalita na ako, sumunod kayo. Yun ang message doon. As a father of the country and the one who forged the agreement, kung marami kayong cheche-boreche, bahala kayo. Pero may halong sama ng loob yun. For all you know, is testing the loyalty of people who proclaim, we are for you, Mr. President. Then you follow my advice. I don't need to talk even more. Sumunod kayo sa aking ginawa na forge yung kanilang agreement in 2019. And for the President to stay in the middle now and get part of the flat, hindi naman tama yun. They went to Malacanang 2 nights ago. They got a good message. Very clear. Very clear. You honor your word. Nagbigay kayo ng palabra de honor. Mas importante yan. Higit sa lahat. If you do not get that message, hindi kayo may respeto sa Pangulo. Hinihintay nyo, kayo endorso, tapos kayo, susunod kayo. Pero hindi ganun ang stand ng ating Pangulo. He is being fair. Kayo nag-usap, kayo nagkasundo, nagkamayan kayo, nagpirmahan kayo. Gawin ninyo, don't keep on running to me. I cannot meddle in the internal affairs. Totoo naman yun. That is a correct statement coming from the President now. I cannot meddle with your affairs. But I'm telling you, you came to me for advice. I'm saying, you honor your word. If that is not clear yet, Speaker Cayetano, I don't know what message he's waiting for.
Kong, aabot ba sa 14 yung budget sa tingin ninyo?
Kung hindi pinopospon, wala kami session ngayon, tinan nyo. Sino ang nagpospon? Si Speaker. Kung kami magtatrabaho tuloy-tuloy, tapos yan. Malapit na kami matapos eh. More than halfway na kami sa plenary session, deliberation. So, given 2 more weeks, madaling matatapos yan. Pero kung hindi, ikakansilahin yung session at gagamitin yung dahilan si Velasco na naman may kasalanan, hindi naman tama yun. May appeal to my colleagues. Let us not take personal sides so violently one-sided. Let's think of the institution. Kaya tinatanong nila ako, kanino ka ba? Ako para sa Kongreso. I want the institution to develop integrity. Alam niyo, napakahirap i-develop yan. Kung tayo pabali-baligtad, ano man ang gawin natin, hindi tayo re-respetuhin ng tao.
Yan.
Well, Kong, pero I have one more question. Kong, pero ganito po kasi, well, in the end, whatever the president says, in the end, it still has to come down to a vote by the 299 members of Congress, diba? Whatever processes that get involved in the middle, in the end, botohan pa rin eh. Does Lord Alan Velasco have the numbers? Can he upset the supposed numbers of the speaker?
Ito ang aking personal assessment. Yung botohan kahapon, huwag yung paniwalaan yun. Because malabo ang mga issue, malabo ang presentation, malabo ang proseso. 184, naka-register na attendance sa aking computer, 111 lang. Saan galing yung 83 other vote? Dagdag ko pa yung 9. Meron pang nag-say na isa. Saan galing yung balance ng 194 doon sa 111? 83 votes. Just cropped up. Ano yun? By telephone? Anong klaseng proseso yan? If that is the way we would handle Congress, yun ang sinasabi ko. Magiging katawa-tawa ang Kongreso ng Pilipinas. And I don't want that. An agreement was forged. We all respected it.
Okay. Kong,
Yung has no more choice today but to step down on the 14th, which is the result of the second time the President has spoken on the issue.
Kung alam ba natin kung saan kaya nakaposisyon ngayon yung tinatawag na Mindanao Block? Kasi ang pagkakalam natin, itong Mindanao Block na ito yung talagang unang baluarte ito ni Lord Alan Velasco. Pero in the last a few days ago, nakita natin na yung anak ng presidente, may meeting with Alan Peter Cayetano. So I'm just wondering kung saan nakaposisyon dito yung Mindanao Block sa Kongreso.
Susunod yan sa payo ng ating Pangulo. Being the leader of the country and Mindanao especially, they will all follow the President's admonition like the rest of us. We ran to the President for intervention. Hindi naman ang Presidente pumunta ron, ito gusto ko Kaya yung independence of Congress, andun pa rin. Nag-umpisa itong kusot na ito noong July. Dapat bumalik tayo sa July dahil doon nagmula lahat yun. At that point in time, Cayetano was practically installed. Hindi naman election yun. We had to go through the process of electing him just to follow the rules of the House. But everybody voted for him already. Yun ang kasunduan Kaya pag binago mo ang provision ngayon yan, umaayaw ka sa kasunduan. Yun ang ibig sabihin na hindi mo iginagalang yung palabra de honor mo. Dahil wala naman yan na fast provisions na merong penalty for non-compliance or anything. Nagkamayan kayo, igalang ninyo yung inyong pagkakamay, kasunduan, at saka yung salitang binitiwan ninyo noong July 29. You cannot change the rules. 1521. Doon ko lang narinig yung 1521 Galing yan sa kanilang parehong kampo They both agreed on the date, 15 months for Cayetano, 21 months for Velasco. Now, why do you change the rule? Show me the number. Wala namang ganong klaseng usapan Hindi naman namin hiningi kay Cayetano, show us the number. Hindi. Nakinig kami kay Pangulo sapagkat humingi kami ng payo, tinigyan kami ng payo, everybody follow. Ngayon, yun ang paalala ng Pangulo. Sumunod kayo sa kasunduan. Kung hindi kayo tunay na maginoo. Puro kayo honorable. Agalang and therefore you should stand pat on that particular position of the member of Congress.
Dapat lalaki
Para
ka
po-
usap.
Sir, para po konting konteksto, baka sa pabit, mga a year ago, if I remember correctly, a year ago, nung pinagtatalunan pa yung position ng speakership, tatlo yung mga primary contenders and si Alan Peter was not actually one of the top contenders.
Correct.
Who were the,
Correct.
I think Romualdez was one, si Velasco was one, even Bungab at the time was one. Ano yung mga
Meron siya.
numbers during that time?
Palagay ko, it would have been a very close fight between Velasco and
Natin.
Velasco was not part of the equation. Kaya nga, tanong ng marami, ang galing naman ito. Nagkaroon ng konting labo-labo, konting gulo. He ended up number 1 agad.
You mean Cayetano?
Cayetano. Kaya, yun din dapat ang sundin ngayon. The agreement should be fulfilled to the end. Hindi pwedeng magbabago tayo ng salita in the middle of the 3-year term. 15, 21, sundin natin yan. No changing of terms and provisions at this point in time. Unless you're backing out.
Ano sa tingin niyo magiging senaryo kung sa tingin po ninyo, pag hindi bumaba, pag kumapit pa rin, ano mangyayari po? Anong senaryo po kinikinita ninyo?
Palagay ko, mapipilitan ng Kongreso magboto. Yan ang sinasabi ni Congressman Mike, tama naman siya. Kung kailangan pang pagbutuhan. Pero palagay ko, ang mananalo, si Velasco. Because his president has spoken, and I'm sure a great majority will follow and heed the admonition and advice of the president. Ganun ang reality niya. Because the president was placed in the middle from the beginning of all of this. He did not volunteer. He just said, kung makakatulong, tutulong ako. Tumakbo sila sa presidente. Pumayag ang presidente mag-term sharing. Si Pangal sabi, okay with me, magkaroon kayo ng term sharing. Para sa ngayon, I figure, ang sentimiento ng Pangulo, bakit kayo nagkakagulo meron kayong kasunduan. Sumunod kayo sa kasunduan. Yun lang ang hinihingi ko sa inyo. Ngayon, yung sinabi ng Secretary Lopez, yun ang kanyang sariling interpretasyon sa attitude ng Pangulo. Pero kung ako ang Pangulo, hindi na ako sasalita. Sinabi ko na yan dito sa harap ni Cayetano at harap ni Velasco. May testigo pa ako, Senator Bongo. Ano pa ang pag-uusapan? You decide on your own. But I'm sure, as a leader politician and a man of honor, President Duterte, will feel aggrieved if they do not follow their word.
Alright. Mga Yotits, kung wala na kayong tanong, papasalamat po tayo sa oras po ng ating panauhin. Si Buhay Party List Representative. Yes, dito Patrick, may tanong ka ba?
Sir, nagbihis pa ako para sa inyo.
Bago
bilis eh.
babatiin ko si Ed, nagbihis pa, naglagay na
Ayun, no?
si Lord,
Yes, sir.
na. Kayong dalawa, pinapayuhan ko, huwag kayo magsusuot ng mga dark gray, black.
Yeah.
Hindi hindi tugma sa ating bansa yan. We are a tropical country. We should wear tropical shirts.
Tama. Sige.
Let's not even call it Hawaiian. No, I called it my Filipino shirt because
Filipino
tropical
shirt.
tayo eh. If you want to have a good day, a lighter day, a happier day, you start wearing colorful tropical shirts. At tugma sa ating weather, sa ating tropical character and nature, and you will fit in as a perfect example of a Filipino.
Sabihin niyo wala kayo, papadala yan si Congressman. Nagbigay dati yan.
Kung walang tropical shirt yan, bibigyan ko. Dahil marami ko eh.
Oo.
For so many
Ako
years
nabigyan
now,
ako ng dati. Oo.
for so many years now, my friends have been, pag birthday mo, anniversary mo, pag Pasko, pag any occasion, they know what I appreciate, and that's a tropical shirt. Kaya marami akong tropical shirt. I'll give the three of you.
Iyon, no? Yan.
Sige.
Oo. Ano?
Mabuhay kayo, Kong.
Po, maraming salamat po sa oras niyo.
Mabuhay po.
Ulitin ko I am for defending the word of honor that we followed in 2019. Let us not break that now and even cause a showdown, which we should avoid. There's no need for a showdown. May mapapahiya dyan, may matatalo. Let's just follow what is the best advice that we got. And that is from the President. Follow your word of honor. The term sharing agreement must be upheld. Now, it's for the members of Congress to interpret that. Secretary Roque may have missed one comma and one period. Kaya interpretation niya medyo nasa gitna masyado. Pero sa totoo lang, yung nangyari noong 2 nights ago, malinaw ang message ng President. Wala tayong pag-uusapan. Yung kanilang manifesto, hindi nga binasa. That is not necessary. Hindi yan ang issue ngayon. The issue is your agreement. You respect and you honor your word. So, yun ang kailangan natin ngayon. Present times, in the middle of all this pandemic, hindi importante yung posisyon. Hindi importante yung salapi, yung yaman, kapangyarihan. Wala yan. Ang kailangan ngayon yung pagkatao natin. We're all members of Congress. Let us uphold the institution above all else. Yung Speaker Cayetano, my best piece of advice to him, just accept your word and follow through and do not resist because ayaw naman nating magkahiyaan pa. Pero pag nagkaroon ng showdown, nakikinikinita mo. Susunod ang karamihan ng members of Congress doon sa payo ng ating Pangulo. Dahil yun talagang full of wisdom and concern for the integrity of the House of Representatives. Kaya palagay ko, kahapon, iba yung storya. Pati yung botohan, medyo may konting milagro. 111 lang yung present. 194 yung boto binila. Kung gusto niyo na showdown talaga, mag face-to-face session tayo. Mag-iingat tayo sa roll calls, sa quorum, sa bilangan ng boto, para talagang tiyak natin na yung resulta hindi na maniobra. Dahil pag maniobra yan, talaga hindi na mabubuo ang Kongreso. Magiging katawa-tawa na ang katayuan namin. So I will propose, kung talagang gusto ng showdown vote, let's do it in person. We have to attend the session and let's vote properly. Not by Zoom, not via Zoom. Because hindi kayo makakapagsalita pag via Zoom. Kahapon nagre-reklamo ko eh. No?
Marami.
Mali yung boto. Laki ng diferensya. Pero hindi ako pinagsalita eh. Why? In-unplug lamang. Nakalagay doon, you have been muted. Anong klaseng kongreso? Anong klaseng demokrasya ito? They can pull.
Kung makasingit isang tanong.
Yung po bala yung gusto niyo mangyari. Kung if it comes to a final count, you want all the congressmen to be there present to personally give their vote.
I would rather not have that. Ayoko may mapahiya. Pero kung pipilit nila, so be it. Pero gawin natin tama. Huwag kayo mag-isip na maaari kayo makalamang pamamagitan ng internet, ng Zoom, ng plug na hawak-hawak ng speaker.
Oo.
That's
Well,
what
I asked po kasi malamang po baka yan na mangyari come August 14 kasi 'di ba mukhang magpipilit yung kampo ni Cayetano na tapos na ang bilangan. So baka diyan patungo yan.
Pag iginiit niya yan, that's an open defiance. And I don't think he's ready to do that. And I don't think the majority of members of Congress are willing to do that. Alam ko ang sentimiento ng Kongreso, alam ko ang damdamin ng marami, lahat sila ay may loyalty kay Pangulong Duterte. So, kung handa kayong bumangga dyan, para kayong bumangga sa pader, huwag naman. Ayoko namang mapahiya si Speaker Cayetano. The best thing he can do is to honor the terms of the agreement, and we will all be continuously working together as friends and allies na hindi napahiya sino man. Let's try to avoid that as much as possible. But if they insist, then so be it. Mag-election tayo. I'm sure a great number will vote for Velasco because they would rather that we honor our word. Worried din ang karamihan. Marami na ako nakausap at this point in time. Worried sila na hinaharap ng Kongreso nito. Kung tayo'y maglalaro-laro ng ganyan, wala tayong pupuntahan pare-pareho. Baka masayang itong next 2 years natin. So I appeal to Speaker Cayetano, rein in your men. Nagwawala sila kahapon. Same guy.
Well, kung makasingit lang na isang tanong.
Opo.
Kasi dito sa valedictory speech ni Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano, sinabi niya that he has actually improved the image of the House of Representatives during his time. Tsaka marami sa mga militanya siya ng mga accomplishment niya. So, Kong, totoo ba? Do you feel na may palpable na improvement dun sa imahe ng Kongreso?
Bibigyan ko
Because of
kayo
him?
ng example na why I do not buy that. Saan ba nanggaling yung proposal to postpone the election? Sa kanila. Yung mga batas na ipinapasa namin na madalian, yung CULS, ARISE, walang pondo. Economic stimulus, walang pondo. Ipangungutang 2.8 trillion pesos. Uutangin pa. Kaya sabi nga ng Department of Finance, we cannot approve that. That is illegal, even unconstitutional. Because when you pass a law na mayroong kailangan pananalabi, kailangan mayroong kalakip na certification of availability of funds. Yan ang sinusunod ng lahat ng gobyerno. Even the barangays cannot pass any piece of barangay ordinance na walang pundo. Pero ito, ipinasa namin, economic stimulus, umaasa mga negosyante, merong ibibigay sa atin. Umaasa yung mga mahihirap, merong ibibigay sa atin. Walang ibibigay sa inyo sapagkat walang pondo eh. Utangin pa. Eh, illegal yan. So yung performance na yan, I don't consider that as an efficient piece of legislation that is anchored on the rule of law and the constitutional provision on any budget-related legislation. So therefore, I cannot agree that you are an outstanding speaker. Siguro kay Velasco hindi lulus sa mga ganyan. He would be very candid. Dapat walang pera. Kaya huwag tayo magpasa ng mga batas na ganyan. I am citing only two. I can recite a litany of erroneous leadership. But that's not the point. Ayoko na. Usapan pa yan. I am taking the words of the President. Honor the term sharing. Huwag na kayong mag-away-away. Ako nga, yan ang sinasabi ko. Huwag na tayo magkahiyaan pa dahil baka hindi na tayo mabuo after that.
Alright. Maraming salamat po.
Humabol ako po. Meron din ako, akala mo.
Congratulations! Hindi na
Sino nagkapot sa'yo, Joby? Sino nagkapot sa'yo?
Meron ka na pala. Dalawa na lang ipapadala.
Dalawa na lang.
Yan, tuloy. Yan, kaming dalawa na lang yung
Kaya pa tayo ng ulay. Hindi mo naman suot eh. Ano kaya yun?
Congressman Lito, salamat po sir sa oras po
Abis
ninyo.
nilipan ako eh.
Maraming salamat.
Mabuhay po kayo.
Thank you. Mabuhay.
Alright.
Tingin ko
Yan
si
po, mga
Joby hindi
kapatid.
nakasya sa kanya.
Di ba pwede magpapag dito? Paano kayo sosot dito? Di nakita ng tao.
Alam mo, nagtataka ako, Joey, paano mo nakuha yan na nakaupo ka lang dyan? Sino nagabot sa'yo?
Ako lang!
Gumapang.
Gumapang yung nagabot sa'yo, kaya hindi nakita. Ha?
Someone. Okay.
Magaling sa gapangan, Joby, ha?
Okay, mag-guess tayo.
Oy, Dok. Ready na.
Wala.
Context lang muna po.
Okay. Ay, ano na ba? Our guest documentary maker?
Yes.
Okay. Sige.
Imported to.
Important.
Sige, paliwanag mo.
Ito po kasi, kung okay lang sa inyo, i-taglish ko na para medyo nakukuha rin ng ating guest. Kasi ang ating guest galing pa sa Canada. And she's already listening now and we'll bring her in a few minutes. Our guest is a documentary maker who was here in the Philippines 1987 or 1988 to produce a documentary on the Philippines. It was a startingly. Ayusin natin. It was startingly. It was a startingly. I don't want to use words that are too but it was a documentary I want to have a copy of for myself. There, let me put it that way. I think it was aired for the first time only 2 weeks ago with the Ang Docu Film Festival. A lot of Filipinos had never seen it before, but for the first time, I think Filipinos saw it at least online. So we have her with us tonight.
Banggitin mo muna, Bok, tungkol saan? Tungkol sa...
Oh yeah, the documentary is titled "A Rustling of Leaves." It's about the New People's Army insurgency in 1987-1988, the early years of the Aquino administration after Ferdinand Marcos was deposed. So this was the transition.
This was the peak. This was actually the peak, di ba, Manny Mogs?
The peak, actually.
This was when the New People's Army was at its strongest, I think.
They were already
post Marcos.
Regular sized formations, military formations like battalions and companies. I think at least companies during that time. So our guest, Miss Nettie Wild, is a Canadian. She came all the way here to talk to all sides of that story. Of course, from the New People's Army rebels to vigilante groups like the Alsa Masa and to Jun Pala, one of the voices of the Alsa Masa, and even to Senator Bato de la Rosa, who was then a second lieutenant of the Philippine Constabulary, the PC. Yeah, in fact, you would see him in Nettie's film.
With hair.
With hair pa no? With hair. And
with
he was
hair,
quite young, pero bato-bato na.
Yeah.
So, yun, for those of you who wonder what it was like in the Philippines then, that period, that shaky period of transition, you should watch Nettie Wild's documentary. So there.
Let's bring her in.
I think we can bring her in already. Is Nettie Wild online already?
I am. Hello.
Hi.
Hello from
Thank
Canada.
you for joining us.
Hello,
You're welcome.
Nettie.
It's very early here. I'm very late.
Sorry for getting you up early.
I
woke you up.
I'd always get up early for the Philippines. Yeah.
Miss Nettie, was I correct when I said that that was the first time your documentary was aired in the Philippines when we showed it on the Ang Docu 2 weeks ago, I think, or 3 weeks ago?
This is the irony. When it was premiered, it was 1989 by the time we got it finished, and it was premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival where it won. So it had huge distribution in Canada, the United States, Europe, Australia, but not in the Philippines. This is the first time that it's been seen, and I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there for it, but only a pandemic, believe me, keeps me from being there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You do know that one of the people you interviewed is now a senator.
I certainly do. Yeah. And in fact, it's very interesting because when I ran into then Lieutenant de la Rosa, it was in very, very difficult and compromising circumstances because at that time, the paramilitaries were really growing, and there was a lot of effort that the military was distancing itself from the paramilitaries, but we were hearing that there was a collaboration. And so when I met then Lieutenant De La Rosa, we kind of cornered him where he was actually with the Tad or the Chop paramilitary. He has taken those scenes from my movie and put them together and put them out on the
that's
web.
General Bato.
Without the rest of the content. Yeah, but what's interesting is that he's put it together like a trailer for the film without the context of how we're showing him. So it's a bit peculiar. Yeah.
But tell us about that. How did you bump into him?
Well, at that time, we were interviewing off and on June Pella, and he was... Which is a fascinating interview, huh? That was a fascinating interview. It was an amazing interview. It went on over about 3 days. And my interest in him was that he was threatening labor leaders, progressive people in the community. And some of these people were winding up dead. And one of them was a labor organizer by the name of Peter Alderetti. And we had heard that there was a detachment which was hanging out with the Tad. And so we went to investigate, and that was De La Rosa's detachment. And ironically, we drove up in our car. And as we drove up, we distracted a questioning that was happening of somebody who they had captured. And that person took advantage of it and ran away towards us. And so they opened fire on us. And that was my introduction to De La Rosa. And we hit the ground with machine gun fire all around us and dust popping up. And then I had to dust myself off and meet him and basically confront him with who he was working with at that time. And those are the clips that he's showing right now. On his website.
There you
That's
go.
him. That's him right now.
On his Facebook,
First Lieutenant from the Philippine Military Academy. Yes, this is
It was
Senator Bato de la Rosa. That's him.
And
With a full head of hair.
yeah, but what I think is intriguing is, to my eyes, he's in a situation that incriminates himself. But these clips are going out, I guess, because he looks so gorgeous and macho. But if you actually, take the mute button off and listen to what he's saying, it's another story. So it's curious. Yeah.
Well, Miss Nettie, let me tell you. Somebody shared because I posted portions of sort of a trailer of your
you.
documentary, so people would watch it
Great.
on my Facebook. Now, Senator De La Rosa was one of those who wrote a comment on my Facebook. He said he was not. He said that he was not the leader that the Tads had their own leader, and that he was only the detachment commander or detachment commander of a PC squad or platoon in part of Davao. So he was saying that he was not the Tad commander.
No, of course not. That was the point. The point was that the constabulary was in cahoots with the paramilitary. That was the whole point. It's much more of a complex story when you have the military working with paramilitary. No, I was not. The film in no way insinuates that he was the leader of the Tad.
Yes.
Life is more complex than that. Yeah.
The lieutenant doth protest too much.
I'm sorry?
The lieutenant doth protest too much.
Well, he doth send it out. I think he's in love with those images. I think is what's happening.
Okay, Nettie, you were doing the documentary just a year after EDSA happened. you're presenting something more contradictory and more complex with a lot more, let's say, contradictions, while the rest of the country was still in a euphoria, over 86. So
Yeah.
how do you balance those two things?
Well, first of all, I was working with a lot of people, over 100 people helped me make A Rustling of Leaves in the Philippines and Canada. And if there's any nuance in A Rustling of Leaves, it's because of the Filipinos I was working with. And they were saying, wait, there are real contradictions at play in our country, as there are in any country in the world. And it's very important to address those contradictions, nose into them. If they're puzzling, you don't say to the audience, "Oh, this is too complicated. You won't understand." These are the kind of complexities and contradictions that people on a barrio level are living from day to day. And so it was up to me to take these outside eyes and try and understand. And I think in the end, the film, A Rustling of Leaves, is not just about the New People's Army. It's about a question that I felt that was being presented to me. And that was, if I was a Filipino and I wanted to bring about what Ed De La Torre in the film refers to as a good democracy, a nice democracy in the Philippines, what would I do? Would I go underground with the New People's Army? Would I go legal? We follow Bernabe Buscaino and the Partido ng Bayan in their first push for a legal election. And what we discovered that if we did either of those, we would run into the bullets of the paramilitary. And that, in fact, if you went legal, you were even more vulnerable than if you were underground, where you were armed. And so it was to portray that political triangle, as it were. So we spent time with the Partido ng Bayan, with the New People's Army, and with the paramilitary. And in this particular case, with De La Rosa, with the constabulary. Yeah.
Two things that struck me about your interview with Ed De La Torre, two concepts that he mentioned that seem to still apply now. He mentioned democratizing terror was one, and the other one is constriction of the legal space.
Yeah.
That seems to sound familiar until now for a lot of Filipinos.
Well, I think, again, thanks to the guidance of the Filipinos I was working with, we ended up, in a strange way, filming a kind of cauldron that was boiling in Davao and in Mindanao at that time. And in that cauldron, the genie that was let out of the bottle, the extrajudicial killings, the paramilitaries, the response to that, you can't stuff that genie back into the bottle. And I think it's very interesting that from Davao, your president and De La Rosa have risen. And from what I understand in watching the news, there are threads from that story that we followed way back in 1987 directly to what's happening now. And, I'll be very interested to see if Filipinos, the most important audience for A Rustling of Leaves, if our story resonates, if those connections were made for them as they were for you. And certainly Ed was amazing, because in him we had somebody who, with intelligence and humor and the real ability to storytell, somebody who could really synthesize that moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there any way for other Filipinos to watch your film? Or even to purchase your film?
Okay, absolutely. First of all, please support the festival. A Rustling of Leaves was shown as a kind of teaser to the festival as part of films that were made about or under martial law. The festival itself is now opening properly. And A Rustling of Leaves is going to be shown next week for a week. And you can go online and download it. And then there are plans afoot to make it available for a much longer time. So first of all, go to the
Can you
festival.
download it?
Nice.
Yeah, and you can
Okay.
you can stream it
Nettie?
at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Nettie, when you did this documentary, the strength of the CPP-NPA was at its peak. Well, looking back, I think they hit around 40 to 50,000 regulars or something, a huge number like that. And yet, fast forward to 2020, they're not at that same level anymore. They're only a fraction of what they used to be at the time you did this documentary. What do you think went wrong?
Boy, you're asking a Canadian who's
Why,
been
why,
the country-
why did the revolution boil over, for example?
you know,
If watching your documentary, it would seem that it would boil over, given all the atrocities, and all those things. And yet,
It would-
2020, it didn't happen.
I'm not ducking this one. I'm being really honest. I'm not the person to ask at this point because I'm not there. I'm here. And though that's a complex, deep question because for me also, it's a head scratcher because certainly the circumstances are there for people to be reaching out for different forms of change, and how to bring about that. But I'm curious to know what the rest of you think. I don't know. That's an honest answer.
Did you hear about June Pala's death, Nettie?
I did.
And what was your reaction?
Well, I saw a television piece that was done by a young woman who was actually attempting to do a portrait on your president. And in the process of that, she referred to the assassination of June Pala and positioned him as, at that time, when he was assassinated, as being the voice of the underdog. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Isn't life complicated? Because that certainly wasn't the June Pala that I filmed, but life has its twists and turns, and it would appear that somebody powerful didn't want him around. And
It struck me that he was trying to impress you.
June Pala had an enormous ego, and as a filmmaker, that's very juicy. You just sit back and feed it and see where he can take you. And he took us to surprising places. No script writer in Hollywood could make up a character like June Pala.
Yeah.
And he was the thing that was, besides being, entertaining, bizarre, he was giving voice. He was giving us an image and a voice of what a certain segment of people were thinking and doing. And this was very important for our film, because otherwise it's like you're trying to film smoke. And here he was, articulating this policy of basically extrajudicial killings. And it was very, very important, and as I say, very, very surprising, the package that it came in. Yeah.
Yeah, he was comparing himself to, like some people did like a few years ago. He was comparing himself to a guy from Germany.
Goebbels, who was the propagandist for the Nazis, proudly, and and mixing it up with the Pope, and it was it was a constant surprise. But also, when eventually the last interview we had with him, I tied his broadcast into the death to somebody who had wound up quite dead after his broadcast. And at that point, he looked at the camera and he said, "My war is not over yet. I will kill, including the media." And that was the end of the interview. Yeah.
It sounds familiar.
It was time to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, towards the end of your documentary, Mr. Pala said a few words that seemed to be a bit threatening towards you. I was wondering how you felt about that.
My cinematographer, I was right next to the nose of my camera, so my head was right next to my cinematographer, and he said, "It's a cut. Let's get out of here." And what happened, interestingly enough, is we had lit his broadcast booth with lights so that we could get a good image. And at that point, exactly at that point, the glass cracked really loudly, like a gunshot, and all of us hit the floor. And then we left. Yeah. So it was very thinly veiled. And that's the game that was the genie in the bottle, right? This was something that we felt was very important to capture.
What was your reaction when you heard that, oh, the new president of the Philippines is from Davao?
Well, because we got news of the kind of basic platform that he was running on, and his whole what appeared to be a willingness to embrace, if not officially extrajudicial killings, the kind of attitude of, well, this happens when you go out and try and take the law into your own hands, encouraging people to do that in terms of capturing drug dealers and drug users. When I traced him back to Davao, it all made a kind of crazy sense. And it was interesting because when we were there at the time, we were filming in 1987. That was the 1 year that he was not mayor, but he had been vice mayor the year before, and in 1988 came back. And I'm sure, given the kind of personality that he was, that if he had that position at that time, we probably would have filmed him. But at that time, I was puzzled. Why wasn't he on our radar at that time? And, it was just circumstances at that time. It makes total sense. It makes total sense now when you think of the kind of journey that he and now Senator De La Rosa have been on from Davao. This is... I was very privileged to be given a window into, I think, an important chapter in contemporary Philippine history, a backgrounder anyway. And again, I just really have to credit all the Filipinos I worked with who were not swept up by the Cory bubble, but were saying, there are major contradictions afoot here. And they really pushed this film into a better film, I think, a more complex film. It's I don't think you do anybody any favors by making propaganda. And certainly A Rustling of Leaves, one of the major tenets that I put forward to everybody that we worked with, including the Underground Army, was that, allow me in deep, this foreigner, this person who doesn't even speak your language, and show me at your most vulnerable. We show a people's court and a tactical offensive, and I retain the editorial control. That's a big ask. And but I think, I just had this deep sense that unless I was able to nose right into those contradictions and really, really embrace people at their most vulnerable, then people, they just wouldn't listen. I really, really wanted to get the audience in a place where they were going, holy smokes, if I was a Filipino, what the heck would I do? What would I do? And put them in the position that everybody from the burial level right up to the command of either army has to face. And that was the result, was A Rustling of Leaves inside the Philippine Revolution. And it has had huge audiences outside of the Philippines. And now, I hope the same will happen in the Philippines, its most important audience.
I was also impressed because you interviewed Ka Oris and Father Frank Navarro.
I did indeed.
It was very difficult at the time.
Well, it was difficult, not just because the armed forces of the Philippines were doing everything they could to make it difficult, of course, but there was, again, this is the complexity. There was huge debate within the movement itself. And there were people within the command of the Mindanao Commission and the New People's Army, the party, who did not want me in so deep. You can imagine, there they are, they're in the middle of fighting a guerrilla war, and they're going, what? You're allowing a film crew into the middle of this? And don't forget, this was also the height of all the purgings that were happening, because Marcos's deep penetration agent campaign was also at its height. He wasn't around, but the effects were. And so it was a very tumultuous time. And there we were, deep, deep, deep inside the movement. And it was Ka-Oris, they left the decision to him in the end. They didn't agree with it, but they left it to him. And he said yes instead of no to my camera and to our crew. And it was very interesting decision on his part. And at that time, the only person I could find who would go to the mountains with me, my Canadian crew wouldn't go, was Filipino filmmaker Jojo Sescon. And the two of us went up into the mountains. Yeah.
And Kao is still fighting in Mindanao.
Ever since.
Yeah, until now.
Yes, absolutely. And I understand that he's gained quite a lot of position within the movement. I have no idea how the outside world perceives him, but I'd be curious to know if he has some kind of personality or profile in the general public. But within the movement, he seems to be quite senior.
Yeah.
Nettie,
Yeah.
okay, Nettie, you've done documentaries on drug addiction.
I
You've
have.
done one in Mexico, Chiapas.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell us about what common denominator you find in the humanity of all these documentaries?
Well, first of all, it was really interesting because the Filipino experience, A Rustling of Leaves, really prepared me for Mexico when we went to spend time in Zapatista territory with the uprising there. It was an indigenous uprising against the government. And guess what? We ran smack into paramilitaries. So I knew it was so interesting. It was familiar. And this is the thing that's so interesting about what was happening in the Philippines. It wasn't just what was happening in Mindanao in particular. It wasn't just an incubator for your own national politics, but it's something that this phenomena of getting, in the Filipinos' case, Filipinos to fight Filipinos, exactly the same thing was happening throughout Central and South America, and in this particular case, Mexico. So that was a political parallel. But as a storyteller, A Rustling of Leaves was my first big film. Your country taught me a lot. And one of the things was I had come into this originally as an actress, so I knew the tenets of drama. I knew that it was important to be able to embrace conflict. And in order to embrace conflict, it was important that I get the many sides of the story and try and get the hearts that beat on the many sides of the story and not make propaganda and nose into those contradictions. And that really, I'm going to say kind of unfortunately, set a pattern for me, and only because of this. My movies are successful. We do go out into the mainstream media. Rustling of Leaves was not shown in church basements in North America and in Europe. It was shown in full-on mainstream cinemas and broadcast around the world. And the reason is because it has a real dramatic thrust. It really, the story is really shaped. The real story is shaped by real events, but at the core is that social contract with the people in front of my camera, that they reveal themselves at their most vulnerable, I retain editorial control so that it's possible for me to say to a Lieutenant De La Rosa or to a commanding officer of the New People's Army that nobody else is going to be in that editing room. And the reverse is also true, is that in that social contract, I am then beholden to deliver the goods in a story that will actually reach ears that normally, I want my movie to go out to people who are beyond the local solidarity group. I want those people, Canadians, to be scratching their heads across the country, not just people who go to see political movies. And so it's incumbent on me to work not only in the edit room, but then later in distribution to get that movie out. And that shaped my career for all my movies, both in terms of the form of the movie and how to get it out there, and a confidence that these stories were huge. A lot of people call them political documentaries. I call them high-stakes human dramas, because that's what they are. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, on that note, thank you very much for your time, Ms. Nettie Wild. And hope the Filipinos get to watch your documentary, A Rustling of Leaves, because let's face it, the Philippines prepared you for all those documentaries because we are not an Oriental country, we're a Latin American country.
And I would also encourage people, if your family's like mine, there's somebody in your family who is the complete polar opposite in terms of politics. Grab them, sit them down in front of A Rustling of Leaves, watch it together, and then tell me what happens. And I'm really curious.
All right.
Okay. For those who haven't seen the documentary yet, just go to daangdocu.ph for the
It's still
calendar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's actually in YouTube.
It
On YouTube?
not
Yeah,
right,
YouTube.
but don't look at that one. That's a pirated version.
Welcome to the Philippines.
And it's bad quality. You attack my heart as a filmmaker. But stay tuned, because A Rustling of Leaves is not going away. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's camcording. Manny, nakita mo.
All right.
Thank you, Nettie.
Nettie, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing the Philippines a favor and documenting that very important part in our history.
Oh.
I think it had to take a Canadian like you to do that.
Oh,
Thank
and
you.
a lot of Filipinos. A lot of Filipinos.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
At thank you rin po sa mga nanonood po sa atin. Ituloy po natin kwentuhan bukas. Wala na po tayong oras. Nagagalit na po yung producer natin. Lord Rivera po, Joey Francisco, Manny Mogato, Ed Linggao, at Patrick Paes. Mabuhay po tayong lahat. Ito po yung Wag Po. Good night.